You are listening to the So Now What podcast with Lana Manikowski, episode number 94. Hey, so good to see you. And if you're on YouTube, and be with you if you're listening in on the podcast, as we talk about something that is just so at the forefront, not only my own personal mind, but of many of the students that I work with. There is somehow this really uncomfortable moment that comes up for us when maybe we see someone that we haven't seen in a while or run into somebody that maybe knew us when we were going through fertility treatments, or maybe meet someone for the first time and somebody asks us if we have kids. It's just for those of us that weren't able to have kids or don't have kids, it seems like such a jarring question. But in my realm of belief, I think that people just really don't realize how jarring that question can be. So I thought this week on the podcast, I would talk about how to deal with a question, a simple question of, do you have kids? 4 words that really have created a lot of turmoil and impact for us if you are childless, not by choice. And it can really be emotionally challenging. And so I thought I would offer some strategies that I have worked through with some of my students and share them with you this week on the podcast. But before I do that, I want to remind you that I am about to near my second birthday of the So Now What podcast. And I would love it if you would kindly, if you've listened to this podcast and you've enjoyed it at all or found it in some way helpful to you, or you've shared it with a friend who has given you feedback, I would love it if you would help me out by offering either a rating or a review of the podcast. So, whatever, if you listen to it on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, wherever it is, if you could just rate and review the podcast, I would so appreciate it. And the reason I ask of this from you is because the more people that rate and review the podcast, the more likely it will be that when someone is searching life after infertility, this podcast will show up because it has gotten good ratings and people find it. People like you have found a resource out of it, have found some hope from it, or maybe created a connection through it. So if you do take time to do a rating and or a review, I would love to send you an Others Day tank top from the Others Day that took place earlier in May. And that's it. I would just love that. So if you could help me out, I would so appreciate it. So let's get started now and talk about how we can handle the question that people ask, do you have kids? And I mentioned at the start of this that this is something near and dear to me because this just happened to me. It happens all the time, but I've been really working on a new approach at how to answer that question with simply saying no. 2 letters that seem to be such a hard thing to come out of your mouth when you are childless, not by choice. Simply just saying no and pausing. So if you're not there yet, if you're not ready to just say no, I'm going to offer you some strategies or maybe the top 10 things that you can do to answer that question. So I first want to offer that you can just take a deep breath and stay composed when somebody asks you if you have kids. Just take a moment to just gather yourself and breathe into that question and respond calmly with an answer so that you feel more in control of the situation. And maybe if you know you're going somewhere that is going to be a room full of strangers, maybe you're going to a work event or a networking event where you've not met people before. And most likely people are going to ask if you have kids. for right or for wrong, appropriate or inappropriate. That's commonly an icebreaker question many people ask. So if you can just stay calm, take a deep breath, and just answer the question from a calm demeanor. Secondly, remember that it's okay not to have kids, and remind yourself that you tried all that you could to have kids. And if your answer is no, that no can be a complete sentence, but you can be very proud of who you are with answering no. You don't have to be embarrassed or shameful that you're not a mom. You can just answer no, I'm not a mom, and feel proud of who you are. And I think that everyone's path is unique. Maybe some people chose not to be a parent. Maybe if you're like me, you stopped at IVF and IUI and you chose not to adopt or not to get an egg donor. So understanding that it's okay to not be a mom, and it's okay not to have kids, and it's okay to say no when somebody asks you if you're a mom. And one of the we go to number 3, one of the things that I think is so helpful is to have a prepared response. If you know you're going to be somewhere and you know that that question is likely to come up, think ahead of time. How do you want to answer that question? And when you've thought about it or maybe rehearsed it a little bit in your mind, it might not feel as jarring if you know what you're going to say. Maybe something like, no, we've chosen not to have kids, or no, it's not in the card for me, or simply just no. And for number 4, I think it's important to not get defensive. If you feel a little jarred by it, that is okay. But remember that people ask questions mostly out of curiosity. And frankly, because asking if you're a mom tends to be a social norm, and people probably just don't realize how sensitive that topic is for you. So if you can avoid getting defensive, I think that will help to preserve some of that energy for you, but also give you an opportunity to leave the conversation not feeling so worked up because of that question. So number 5, shift the focus. If it's something that you're not wanting to talk about, you don't feel comfortable discussing it, just politely redirect the conversation. Maybe just say something like, I so appreciate your interest, but can we just talk about something else for now? And I doubt someone's going to say, no, we can't, and do a shakedown and ask you why you don't have kids. But if you just shift the focus and maybe say, thanks, but I'd rather not talk about it. Number 6, seek support from either a trusted friend, a family member, somebody who you know that you can go to and talk about, maybe how you're feeling after this conversation comes up. And maybe if you're going somewhere and that person's going to be with you, maybe have them be your wing person and maybe say, hey, if you hear somebody ask me about the kid thing, can you like interrupt, or maybe tell them to, give them the high sign and just, let the person who's asking know, like, I don't want to talk about it. Lean on friends, create your support system, let people know that if they're part of your story and they know that your story, they want to help you, and let them know that they can help you. Number 7, this is something that I really love, is educate. This might be your opportunity to educate the question asker. And if you feel up to it and you feel comfortable discussing it, you can use this opportunity to tell them that, not everyone is comfortable being asked if they have kids, or not everyone is able to have kids or chooses to have kids. And the person who's asking the question might really appreciate you letting them know, because in their world or in their family or in their circle, maybe they don't know anyone with infertility. Maybe they don't know anyone who chose not to have kids. And so they just think it's a commonplace question to ask. So this is a great opportunity to educate. Number 8, be compassionate with yourself. Okay. Like this is so, like, to me, like some of the hardest work that I've done is feeling compassionate when I tell someone that I don't have kids. Because for a long time, I judged myself. I told myself that something was wrong with me. I told myself that I didn't try hard enough to become a mom because I left options of egg donor or adoption on the table. So if you can just be compassionate and let yourself be proud of who you are, that you tried, even if it was you never even went through fertility treatments. If you just decided that if you couldn't have a child naturally, you weren't going to have a child, allow yourself to be compassionate for what you tried and proud of what you tried in your journey, no matter what it was, how long it was, or how many rounds of IVF or IUI you went through. Number 9, engage in self-care and maybe bring some activities that bring you joy and elevation. So maybe it's spending time with loved ones or going for a run or working out. Maybe it's taking your dog for a walk. Maybe just cuddling on the sofa. I know that's something I love to do with Coco, but when you allow yourself to just practice some mindfulness or some self-care, it might help to alleviate that stress that you feel after somebody asks you if you have any kids. And then number 10, know when to walk away. And I think this is something that takes, in our minds, it takes a lot of courage to walk away from a conversation that becomes uncomfortable. So if you find yourself in that social setting, in that work meeting, or in this networking event, and you hear someone going around and starting to ask that question, that might be a perfect cue to dart out and say, hey, I'm going to use the restroom real quick. Or, listen, I'll be back. I'm going to go grab something to drink. I'll be back. But if you just politely excuse yourself from the situation, you can certainly protect your emotional boundaries that way. But whatever it is that you decide, know that there is no wrong answer to how you respond to that question, even if it's simply a no. And I know for some of the students that I've worked with, we've been working a lot on this of how to not feel like you have to over explain or that you have to justify why your answer is no. And you'll get to a point in your journey where you just decide what you want your answer to be. But in order to get there, you have to try some of these things out. And it might feel uncomfortable the first couple of times you do it, or the first 20 times, for goodness sake. Like it might feel really hard to find the right words or have it come out of your mouth in a way that seems natural and flowing, but that's okay, because this is your answer to give. And nobody can tell you the right answer to give or what answer is right for you. And just do your best to know that you are not a mom, and it doesn't make you any less than anyone else. It doesn't mean that you're less worthy or less meaningful to the conversation if your answer is no. So I hope that helps you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out, but know that this is the type of stuff that we work on in the Thrive After Infertility Mastermind. We practice these questions, we share them with each other in the mastermind. I can't even tell you how many of my students have found opportunities to just feel more comfortable with their answers when they can share it with one of their classmates in the mastermind. And so I invite you, if that sounds like something that you want to be part of, the Thrive After Infertility Mastermind applications are opening soon. And I would love for you to be part of our next round. Thrive is absolutely the most meaningful opportunity that my students, at least from what they tell me, the most meaningful opportunity that they have found to create a life that they truly love, that they feel fulfilled, that they feel meaningful and purposeful through the work that they've done in Thrive. So let me know if that's something that you're interested in. I would love to have you as part of our next round. So have a beautiful week. I love you. And remember, it is never too late to discover your meaning. I'll talk to you next week.